Hi everyone, this is Glenda Ganzon and welcome to my Human Anatomy and Physiology class. And for today's video, I'm going to discuss the bones of the lower limb of the human skeletal system. So stay tuned. Like the upper limb, the lower limb is divided into three regions. The thigh is the portion of the lower limb located between the hip joint and knee joint. The leg is specifically the region between the knee joint and the ankle joint. Distal to the ankle is the foot. The lower limb contains 30 bones. These are the femur, patella, tibia, fibula, tarsal bones, metatarsal bones, and phalanges. The femur is the single bone on the thigh, and patella is the kneecap and articulates with the distal femur. The tibia is the larger weight-bearing bone located on the medial side of the leg, and the fibula is the thin bone of the lateral leg. The bones of the foot are divided into three groups. The posterior portion of the foot is formed by a group of 7 bones, and each of which is known as the tarsal bone. Whereas the midfoot contains 5 elongated bones, each of which is a metatarsal bone. The toes contain 14 small bones, and each of which is a phalanx bone of the foot. The femur or thigh bone is the single bone of the thigh region, and it is the longest and strongest bone of the body and accounts for approximately 1/4 of a person's total height. The rounded proximal end is the head of the femur, which articulates with the acetabulum of the hip bone to form the hip joint. The fovea capitis or capitis is a minor indentation on the medial side of the femoral head that serves as the site of attachment for the ligament of the head of the femur. And this ligament spans the femur and acetabulum, but is weak and provides little support for the hip joint. It does, however, carry an important artery that supplies the head of the femur. The narrowed region below the head is the neck of the femur. This is a common area for fractures of the femur, and the greater trochanter is the large upward bony projection located above the base of the neck. Multiple muscles that act across the hip joint attach to a greater trochanter, which, because of its projection from the femur, gives additional leverage to these muscles. The greater trochanter can be felt just under the skin on the lateral side of your upper thigh. The lesser trochanter is a small bony prominence that lies on the medial aspect of the femur, just below the neck. A single powerful muscle attaches to the lesser trochanter, running between a greater and lesser trochanters on the anterior side of the femur is the roughened intertrochanteric line. The trochanters are also connected on the posterior side of the femur by the larger intertrochanteric crest. The elongated shaft of the femur has a slight anterior bowing or curvature. At its proximal end, the posterior shaft has the gluteal tuberosity, a roughened area extending inferiorly from the greater trochanter. More inferiorly, the gluteal tuberosity becomes continuous with the linea aspera. This is a roughened ridge that passes distally along the posterior side of the mid-femur. Multiple muscles of the hip and thigh regions make long, thin attachments to the femur along the linea aspera. So the distal end of the femur has a medial and lateral bony expansions. On the lateral side, the smooth portion that covers the distal and the posterior aspect of the lateral expansion is the lateral condyle of the femur, and the roughened area of the outer lateral side of the condyle is the lateral epicondyle of the femur. Similarly, the smooth region of the distal and posterior medial femur is the medial condyle of the femur, and the irregular outer medial side of this is the medial epicondyle of the femur. The lateral and medial condyles articulate with the tibia to form the knee joint. The epicondyles provide attachment for muscles and supporting ligaments of the knee. So the adductor tubercle is a small bump located at the superior margin of the medial epicondyle, and posteriorly, the medial and lateral condyles are separated by a deep depression called the intercondylar fossa. Anteriorly, the smooth surfaces of the condyles join together to form wide groove called the patellar surface, which provides for articulation with the patellobone. The combination of the medial and lateral condyles with the patellar surface gives the distal end of the femur a horseshoe shape. The patella, or what we call as the kneecap, is the largest sesamoid bone of the body. A sesamoid bone is a bone that is incorporated into the tendon of a muscle where the tendon crosses a joint. The sesamoid bone articulates the underlying bones to prevent damage to the muscle tendon due to rubbing against the bones during movements of the joint. The patella is found in the tendon of the quadriceps femoris muscle, the large muscle of the anterior thigh that passes across the anterior knee to attach the tibia. The patella articulates with the patellar surface of the femur and thus prevents rubbing of the muscle tendon against the distal femur. The patella also lifts tendon away from the knee joints, which increases the leverage power of the quadriceps or quadriceps femoris muscle as it acts across the knee, and the patella does not articulate with the tibia. The tibia, or what we call as the shin bone, is the medial bone of the leg and is larger than the fibula, with which it is paired. The tibia is the main weight-bearing bone of the lower leg and the second longest bone of the body, and after femur, the medial side of the tibia is located immediately under the skin, allowing it to be easily palpated down the entire length of the medial leg. The proximal end of the tibia is greatly expanded. The two sides of the expansion form the medial condyle of the tibia and the lateral condyle of the tibia. The tibia does not have epicondyles, and the top surface of each condyle is smooth and flattened, and these areas articulate with the medial and lateral condyles of the femur to form a knee joint. Between the articulating surfaces of the tibial condyles is the intercondylar eminence. It is an irregular elevated area that serves as the inferior attachment point of or for two supporting ligaments of the knee. The tibial tuberosity is the elevated area of the anterior side of the tibia near its proximal end, and it is the final site of attachment for the muscle tendon associated with the patella. So more inferiorly, the shaft of the tibia becomes triangular in shape, and the anterior apex of this triangle forms the anterior border of the tibia, which begins at the tibial tuberosity and runs inferiorly along the length of the tibia. So both the anterior border and the medial side of the triangular shaft are located immediately under the skin and can be easily palpated along the entire length of the tibia. So a small ridge running down the lateral side of the tibial shaft is the interosseous border of the tibia, and this is for the attachment of the interose or interosseous membrane of the leg, the sheath of dense connective tissue that unites the tibia and fibula bones. And located on the posterior side of the tibia is the soleal line. It is a diagonally running roughened ridge that begins below the base of the lateral condyle and runs down and medially across the proximal third of the posterior tibia. So muscles of the posterior leg attach to this line. The large expansion found on the medial side of the distal tibia is the medial malleolus, or we call that as little hammer, and this forms the large bony bump found on the medial side of the ankle region. So both the smooth surface on the inside of the medial malleolus and the smooth area at the distal end of the tibia articulate with the talus bone of the foot as part of the ankle joint. So on the lateral side of the distal tibia is a wide groove called fibular notch, and this area articulates with the distal end of the fibula, forming a distal tibiofibular joint. On the other hand, the fibula is the slender bone located on the lateral side of the leg. The fibula does not bear weight, and it serves primarily for muscle attachment, and thus this is largely surrounded by muscles, and only the proximal and distal ends of the fibula can be palpated. The head of the fibula is the small knob-like proximal end of the fibula. It articulates with the inferior aspect of the lateral tibial condyle, forming a proximal tibiofibular joint. The thin shaft of the fibula has the interosseous border of the fibula, which is a narrow ridge running down its medial side for the attachment of the interosseous membrane that spans the fibula and tibia. So the distal end of the fibula forms the lateral malleolus, which forms the easily palpated bony bump on the lateral side of the ankle, and the deep or medial side of the lateral malleolus articulates with the talus bone of the foot as part of the ankle joint, and the distal fibula also articulates with the fibular notch of the tibia. Okay, let's move on to the tarsal bones. The posterior half of the foot is formed by 7 tarsal bones, and the most superior bone is the talus. This has a relatively square-shaped upper surface that articulates with the tibia and fibula to form the ankle joint. 3 areas of articulation form the ankle joint. The superomedial surface of the talus bone articulates with the medial malleolus of the tibia. The top of the talus articulates with the distal end of the tibia, and the lateral side of the talus articulates with the lateral malleolus of the tibia, or lateral malleolus of the fibula. Inferiorly, the talus articulates with the calcaneus, or what we call as the heel bone, the largest bone of the foot, which forms the heel. So body weight is transferred from the tibia to the talus to the calcaneus, which rests on the ground. The medial calcaneus has a prominent bone extension called the sustentaculum tali. I'll repeat, sustentaculum tali, which means support for the talus, and that supports the medial side of the talus bone. The cuboid bone articulates with the anterior end of the calcaneus bone. The cuboid has a deep groove running across the inferior surface, which provides passage for the muscle tendon. The talus bone articulates anteriorly with the navicular bone, which in turn articulates anteriorly with the 3 cuneiform, or what we call as the wedge-shaped bones. And these bones are the medial cuneiform, the intermediate cuneiform, and the lateral cuneiform. Each of these bones has a broad superior surface and a narrow inferior surface, which together produce the transverse or medial lateral curvature of the foot. And the navicular and lateral cuneiform bones also articulate with the medial side of the cuboid bone. The anterior half of the foot is formed by 5 metatarsal bones, which are located between the tarsal bones of the posterior foot and the phalanges of the toes. And these elongated bones are numbered from 1 to 5, starting with the medial side of the foot. The first metatarsal bone is the shorter and thicker than the others. So the second metatarsal is the longest. The base of the metatarsal bone is the proximal end of each metatarsal bone, and these articulate with the cuboid or cuneiform bones. The base of the fifth metatarsal has a large lateral expansion that provides for muscle attachments, and this expanded base of the fifth metatarsal can be felt as a bony bump at the midpoint along the lateral border of the foot. The expanded distal end of each metatarsal is the head of the metatarsal bone, and each metatarsal bone articulates with the proximal phalanx of the toe to form metatarsal or metatarsophalangeal joint. The heads of the metatarsal bones also rest on the ground and form the ball, or what we call as the anterior end of the foot. The toes contain a total of 14 phalanx bones, or what we call as the phalanges, and they are arranged in similar manner as the phalanges of the fingers. So the toes are numbered from 1 to 5, starting with the big toe, or what we call as the hallux. The big toe has 2 phalanx bones and the proximal and distal phalanges. The remaining toes have proximal, middle, and distal phalanges. A joint between adjacent phalanx bones is called as interphalangeal joint. So when the foot comes into contact with the ground during walking, running, or jumping activities, the impact of the body weight puts a tremendous amount of pressure and force on the foot. And during running, the force applied to each foot as it contacts the ground can be up to 2.5 times of your body weight. So the bones, joints, ligaments, and muscles of the foot absorb this force, thus greatly reducing the amount of shock that is passed superiorly into the lower limb and body. And the arches of the foot play an important role in this shock-absorbing ability. When weight is applied to the foot, these arches will flatten somewhat, thus absorbing energy. And when the weight is removed, the arch rebounds, giving spring to the step, and the arches also serve to distribute body weight side to side to either end of the foot. So the foot has a transverse arc, a medial longitudinal arc, and a lateral longitudinal arc. The transverse arc or arc forms the medial lateral curvature of the midfoot, and it is formed by the wedge shapes of the corniform bones and bases, which is proximal ends of the first to fourth metatarsal bones. This arc helps to distribute body weight from the side or from side to side within the foot, thus allowing the foot to accommodate uneven terrain. So the longitudinal arcs run down the length of the foot, and the lateral longitudinal arc is relatively flat, whereas the medial longitudinal arc is longer or taller or larger. The longitudinal arch or arches are formed by the tarsal bones posteriorly and the metatarsal bones anteriorly. These arches are supported by either end where they contact the ground. Posteriorly, the support is provided by the calcaneus bone, and anteriorly by the heads, or what we call as the distal ends of the metatarsal bones. The talus bone, which receives the weight of the body, is located at the top of the longitudinal arches, and body weight is then conveyed from the talus to the ground by the anterior and posterior ends of these arches. So, strong ligaments unite the adjacent foot bones to prevent disruption of the arches during weight bearing. And on the bottom of the foot, additional ligaments tie together and the anterior posterior ends of the arches. And these ligaments have elasticity, which allows them to stretch somewhat during weight bearing, thus allowing the longitudinal arches to spread. And the stretching of these ligaments stores energy within the foot rather than passing these forces into the leg. And contraction of the foot muscles also plays an important role in this energy absorption. So when the weight is removed, the elastic ligaments recoil and pull the ends of the arches closer together, and this this recovery of the arches releases the stored energy and improves the energy efficiency of walking. So stretching of the ligaments that support the longitudinal arches can lead to pain, and this can occur in overweight individuals or with people who have jobs that involve standing for a long period of time, such as those waitress and other jobs that takes walking or standing for a long time, and or walking running long distance. So if stretching of the ligaments is prolonged, excessive or repeated, it can result in a gradual lengthening of the supporting ligaments with subsequent depression or collapse of the longitudinal arches, particularly on the medial side of the foot. And this condition is called as the pes planus, or what we call as the flat foot or fallen arches. So this ends my discussion about the bones of the lower limb of the human skeletal system. And if you have any question, please write it in the comment section down below and I'll be glad to answer them all. And once again, if you're still not subscribed to my channel, please also do consider subscribing and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be updated with my new videos. And if you like this video, please share and give it a thumbs up. Once again, I would like to thank you all for watching this video and for listening to my discussion. So until my next video, bye everyone!